Welcome to the Beau Leadership Group Podcast, my leadership friends, where we dive into lessons that elevate your influence, sharpen your decision-making, and always keep God in mind. I believe you can get an ROI on your leadership decisions. Today's topic is leadership and management are not the same. They sound like twins. In fact, most MBAs and Masters of Social Work people take classes called Leadership and Organizational Behavior. And that sounds like it's in the category of management. And sometimes it is in the management department at a school. But it's a reason for people to confuse the two terms, leadership and management. But really, they're more like cousins. Both belong in the family of influence, but one inspires people to thrive while the other makes the trains run on time. By the way, I heard there's a Carnegie Deli outpost in Central Station, New York, which suggests to me that there may be a God. I could have used a pastrami sandwich and some cheesecake yesterday. I heard a lyric in music today that said, "I didn't know love ain't always lovely." I don't believe that's true. I believe that if it is love, by definition, it is lovely. The word origin of impeccable is without sin. For example, if you're impeccable with your word, that means you hit the mark with your word exactly, because impeccable means without sin, and sin means not hitting your mark. It's near impossible for me to be impeccable. And a sin is actually anything that doesn't hit the market or the target. Sin doesn't have to be something globally atrocious. The song is fun and upbeat, and I really enjoyed it, but we all take things differently. It rings true to me that your loving relationship may have ups and downs that aren't lovely, but that part of the relationship isn't love. Hopefully, the not lovely part can be something that we learn from that gets us close to love and peace. The reason I bring this up is I feel people will often lose faith when they think God allowed something negative to happen. But I'm here to say, if it isn't good, it probably isn't God. And if it isn't lovely, it probably isn't love. And as some of us think, God and love are pretty close to the same thing, right? These are two words. They're part of the same spiritual realm or dimension. People think management and leadership are the same thing. They are not. You might share this with your friends because they're probably confused too. I also hear laborers say they think that management and leadership are the same. This can be an uneducated point of view when it feels like us versus them. There is bad management and bad leadership that is oppressing the laborer, and they aren't treated well. And leadership and management can be both bad and both oppressing. And this is the reason for this podcast, because without differentiating them, how do you improve them? Well, you got to know what you're improving, and let's learn how to improve both. We'll look at leadership and management are not the same thing. And the leadership in the world of MBAs and business schools is getting rid of manipulation, which was bad management in the past. That used to be taught as a management technique to manipulate. And now we know that that can backfire. And if things backfire, that creates a poor ROI or poor cost benefit analysis. You don't want things backfiring in your business, and leadership takes into account influence and doing the right thing for the right reasons. Management is different. So let's break it down with stories, Bible references, Ivy League insights, and even the latest from McKinsey's new book, A CEO for All Seasons. Keep listening. And of course, I'll keep asking you questions that can make a difference in your business, because this isn't just information, it's transformation of your world, your life, and your business. Leadership in the Bible versus management. Think about Moses. He didn't manage the Israelites like an operations director with spreadsheets. He led them out of Egypt with vision and faith. He didn't say, "Here's your daily KPI report on brick production." He said, "God has a promised land for us." And now contrast that with Pharaoh's overseers. They were managers. They kept production quotas, whipped people into compliance, and optimized brick output. Efficient, yes. Inspiring, not even a little. So question, are you more like Moses leading people towards a vision, or more like Pharaoh's foreman tracking bricks? Because people want to work for Moses, not the Pharaoh. In Nehemiah's story, we also see the paradox. He had a leadership vision and management skill. He cast vision to rebuild Jerusalem's walls, rallied the people, but then set up guard shifts and supply chains. Leadership sparked the action, management kept the momentum. Now for some Ivy League consultant insights. Harvard Business School often says management is about coping with complexity. Leadership is about coping with change. Scott Keller of McKinsey echoed this in his book, CEO Excellence. Great CEOs listen deeply before acting. One even said, "What are people not telling me that I need to hear?" That's leadership, listening. Tom Peters, one of the top management consultants, once said, "Leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders." Managers, by contrast, create systems that produce reliable outcomes. It's really sad, honestly, at times when people don't realize they need to be creating leaders. And why is that? Because if you leave and the organization falls apart and goes completely out of business in 3 months, you didn't lead, you managed. Both matter, but one multiplies human potential. Question: do you multiply leaders in your organization, or do you just multiply checklists and tell people what to do? Part 3: Stories from the world's best CEOs. McKinsey, a CEO for all seasons, describes 4 stages of leadership: 1, stepping up; 2, starting strong; 3, staying ahead; and 4, sending it forward. Satya Nadella at Microsoft lives this out. He spends 20% of his time with customers, not in spreadsheets, but in conversations. He calls himself the Chief Learning Officer. That's leadership. One of the biggest reasons to do market research is that most innovation comes from talking to customers, because customers know the problems. And I made a career out of that and looking and doing focus groups and surveys and ideation studies. Customers identify the problems they would pay to have solved. If they'll pay for it, you can increase your revenue. That can be your business value proposition. Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan Chase warned that you need to be against loyalty to underperforming staff. If you're loyal to a person, you may become disloyal to the organization. That's a tough leadership call, and managers often avoid it because it's tough. It doesn't mean you don't love the person, but the greater good is valued more and is more sustaining to the organization and providing value to the world at large. Leaders can make value decisions. CEOs often have this skill, and managers sometimes wonder why they aren't CEO. Sometimes it's because the manager is value bankrupt. They just don't get the value idea. Here's a friggin' hard question. If you had to choose, would you protect comfort, or would you protect the mission of your organization? It should be clear. The paradox of leadership. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and therapist, taught paradoxical intention. I've talked about this earlier in my podcast too, because I think it's an insight that I'm pretty much the only one talking about, at least these days. If you try to make yourself nervous right before you speak to a group audience, you will calm down. Ironic, paradoxical. Well, last I heard, psychologists still don't know why exactly this works, but paradoxical intention works, and it can make you more comfy if you use it. That's why it is in my sales podcast, because sales is uncomfortable with rejection, and it's not comfy. That's why you can make more money as a salesperson, because it takes some conquering of your fears and rejection. If you fear something, wish for it. If you fear nervousness before a speech, try to make yourself nervous. Ironically, that often breaks the cycle of these anxieties. And leaders understand paradox. Sometimes to go forward, you must pause. Sometimes to scale, you must prune. Your brain actually prunes so that you can think better. Jesus said, "Unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a seed." That's paradoxical leadership. Loss becomes multiplication. Question: what paradox in your leadership do you need to embrace right now? Present and future value of customers is one of them for many companies. Managers track today's sales, leaders invest in future customers. In my experience working with global companies who have huge customer satisfaction goals and huge budgets, hundreds of thousands of dollars, frontline staff often misses the leadership concept of valuing the customer, not just when they come in for this complaining transaction, but realizing they're one of many people just like them who maybe didn't complain, who by word of mouth and repeat customer purchases make the value that pays that employee's wages. And the management of one transaction isn't what we're talking about. Write this down. McKinsey says that organizations that think in customer lifetime value outperform their peers. A decade ago, I used to do a lot of annual presentations to Subway franchises, and I would touch on this. If there's a line, that is a management issue. Employees' leadership, though, is caring about the customer and wanting them to stay and come back next time. So the employee who is a leader says, "Thank you for coming. We will be with you in a minute," so they don't leave. The employee who is managing their next sandwich might not even notice the line, and that does not take a moment for the audience. Misses the important fact that the customer they are serving probably appreciates that the employee appreciates other people like them, so they know it's going to be consistent when they come back. Some franchisees would argue with me about this and not believe that their customer might choose McDonald's the next time or not come back. There was a lot of data to support this, though. There are lots of factors here, and people do prefer when out for an evening that they can rub some elbows with people and be in line. It shows demand that they're doing something that's popular, and it's studied by anthropologists all the time. The value of a customer is not just today. If that customer is not appreciated, they may never come back. That customer may come in for a $5 sandwich today, and you made the sandwich for another customer instead, and you still hit your numbers for the day, management would say, but your revenue is unchanged. Is it really, though? Because that person might have come back for a $5 sandwich 5 days a week. That's $1,250 a year. That customer 5-year value is over $5,000. Leading versus managing is the difference between Shepherd John, who lays down his life for the sheep, versus the hired hand who only clocks in and out. One sees present value, wool and milk. The other sees future value, flourishing sheep who multiply. Question: do you see your customer as a transaction or as a relationship to be cultivated for the long run? So, leadership and management, not enemies, not duplicates, but complementary forces. Managers build order, leaders build vision. Today, they can transform teams, companies, even nations. But let's be clear, if you manage without leading, you will have compliance without commitment. If you lead without managing, you'll have inspiration without execution. So, final reflection, in your role today, what's one area where you need to lead more and one area where you need to manage better? This has been the Beau Leadership Group Podcast. Thank you very much for listening. And remember, empower your leadership and elevate your image with God in mind. Thanks for listening, my leadership friends, and bless your leadership. Let's make the world a better place.